Hey guys, tonight we're pushing through a set of tall brass doors that have been polished by a man paid less than the gloves on display, into a world that desperately wants to look like a palace, and mostly succeeds, the great American department store. Forget the cozy nostalgia of holiday window shopping and the gentle ding of an elevator bell. Behind the marble columns, the perfume clouds, and the smiling clerk who calls you madam, there is a history of aching feet, locked doors, hungry workers, and some of the most cynical psychological tricks ever aimed at a human wallet. And you, lucky listener, are about to live it from the inside. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And a heartfelt thank you to the listener who suggested tonight's topic. Your ideas are the engine that keeps this whole channel running, and I never take that for granted. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Somehow it is always 20 past midnight somewhere. If you would rather drift off with your eyes closed, the channel is now on Spotify too, with the link waiting in the description. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft background hum, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered why the escalator dumps you so far from the exit? Why the clock above the door always seems a little slow when you're trying to leave? Why a store would spray vanilla into the air, hide the staircases, and remove every window so you forget the sun exists? Could you survive a 12-hour shift on your feet without sitting down once, smiling at a woman who just called your entire family stupid over a torn ribbon? Would you last a single day folding handkerchiefs for pennies while the man whose name is carved over the door rides past in a carriage worth more than your whole village? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1902 in a narrow boarding house bed, and today is your very first day on the sales floor. Your feet do not yet know what is coming. Good luck. Your eyes open to the clang of a boarding house bell, and for one merciful second you forget where you are. Then you remember. Today you join the staff of the grandest store in the city, a building so enormous that people travel for miles just to walk through it and buy nothing at all. They call it a palace, and they are not entirely wrong. Marble floors stretch out like frozen lakes, chandeliers drip from ceilings 5 stories up, and the air smells of leather, lilies, and money. It is breathtaking. It is also, you will soon learn, a beautifully decorated machine built to separate human beings from their wages, and you are now one of its smallest moving parts. You dress in the dark because candles cost money, and you have decided, after some reflection, that you would rather eat. Then you walk. The store is far enough from your bed to make your shoes complain, but close enough that you cannot justify the price of a streetcar. So you go on foot through the grey morning, past horse carts and newspaper boys, until the great building rises in front of you like a wedding cake somebody decided to make out of stone. You do not enter through the brass doors. Those are for customers, and you're not a customer. You are scenery. You slip in through a plain side door, sign your name in a ledger watched by a man who looks like he has never been pleasantly surprised in his life, and step onto the floor before it opens. In the hush before the crowds, the store is almost holy. Sunlight, what little they allow, slants across counters polished to a mirror shine. Bolts of silk glow like stained glass. There are gloves for hands you will never shake, hats for heads grander than yours, and perfumes named after cities you will never visit. It is, you realize, a cathedral. Everything about it is designed to make you look up, feel small, and believe that something better is available for purchase just one counter over. The modern shopper would recognize the trick instantly. It is the same feeling you get walking into a store today and suddenly deciding you have always needed a scented candle the size of a fire hydrant. Or, it turns out, is a sales technique, and these people invented it. A supervisor appears and assigns you your post, not the perfume counter, which is a kingdom unto itself, and certainly not the jewellery, which is guarded like a small bank. You get notions. Buttons, thread, ribbon, hooks and pins, the unglamorous little machinery of clothing, arranged in tiny drawers you will be expected to know by heart by lunch. It is the retail equivalent of being handed a mop on your first day at the opera. You take your place behind the counter and try to look like you belong there, like you were born to sell a woman 3/4 of a yard of brown ribbon. Around you the great machine begins to wake. Clerks straighten cuffs. The floor walker glides into position. Somewhere a clock you cannot see ticks toward opening. The doors will swing, the crowd will pour in, and the cathedral will begin doing the one thing cathedrals and department stores have always done best, which is asking you to believe. For now you stand very straight, smile at no one in particular, and wait. The palace is beautiful, the morning is calm, and you have absolutely no idea what is about to happen to your feet. But before the doors open, you really ought to know whose name is hanging over them. Before you clock in, let's talk about the man whose name is spelled in gold over the entrance, because you will be saying it, polishing it, and apologizing on behalf of it for the rest of your career. The men who built these marble palaces were not gentle dreamers. They were ruthless, brilliant, occasionally unhinged merchant kings who turned shopping into a religion and themselves into its high priests. One started as a poor immigrant with a pushcart. Another built a store so vast it had its own power plant, its own post office, and a pipe organ loud enough to rattle teeth. They preached honesty and a fair price to the adoring public while squeezing every possible penny out of the people who actually ran the place, which, starting today, includes you. Understand the scale of these men's ambition. Before them, shopping was a negotiation. You walked into a small shop, you haggled. You were watched suspiciously by a man who fully expected you to steal a spoon, and you left feeling vaguely accused. The merchant kings looked at this and thought, what if it were the opposite of that? What if the shop were enormous? The prices were fixed and printed so no one had to argue. The doors were open to anyone, and the whole experience felt less like buying socks and more like attending a coronation. It was a genuinely revolutionary idea, and like most revolutionary ideas, it made a small number of people staggeringly rich. They competed like rival popes. One installed electric lights when electric lights still terrified people, just so passers-by would gather and gawk. Another offered a money-back guarantee, an idea so radical that customers half expected to be arrested for trying it. They built tea rooms, art galleries, nurseries and rest lounges, anything to make a person feel that the store was not taking their money, so much as gently improving their life. The modern version is the shop that gives you free sparkling water and a sofa while quietly relieving you of $400. The technique has not changed, only the upholstery. But peer behind the gold lettering and the picture sours. The same king who guaranteed the customer satisfaction guaranteed the worker almost nothing. The fair price he advertised did not extend to the wage he paid. He would spend a fortune on a marble staircase and refuse to spend a few coins on a chair for the woman standing beside it for 12 hours. He saw himself as a public benefactor, a civilizer, a man bringing beauty to the masses, and in his own mind he was. He simply didn't count you among the masses worth being kind to. You will meet him perhaps once if you're unlucky. He sweeps through the floor like weather, trailing assistants, inspecting, nodding, occasionally pausing to rearrange a display you spent an hour perfecting. He knows the price of everything in the building down to the penny, and the name of almost no one who sells it. To him you're not a person, you're overhead, a faintly inconvenient cost of doing business like heating. And yet here is the maddening part. He is not entirely a villain. He really did build something extraordinary, a place of genuine wonder, and millions of people genuinely loved it. That is the trick of the whole dark history, and you're about to live inside the contradiction. The palace is real. The magic is real. So is the exhaustion, and so is the bill. And most of that bill you will shortly discover is being charged to you. Speaking of charges, let's talk about what they intend to pay you. Let's discuss your salary, a word that is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting here. For standing on your feet from early morning until the gas lamps glow 6 days a week, you will earn just enough to not quite afford the room you sleep in and the bread you eat, but never both in the same week. The store, in its endless generosity, has also invented a thrilling game called Fines. Arrive a minute late, fined. Sit down, fined. Misfold a glove, fined. Speak too loudly, too softly, or to the wrong person, fined. By payday, a surprising amount of your wage is quietly walked back into the owner's pocket. It is theft, technically, but the legal kind, which is the very best kind to commit if you happen to be the one holding the door. Let's do the grim arithmetic together. Your weekly pay is a small handful of coins, the sort of sum that sounds almost reasonable until you remember it must cover rent, food, clothing, soap, and the occasional luxury of not freezing to death. A respectable room eats most of it. A few meals eat the rest. What remains could be spent on a new pair of stockings or saved against the day you get sick and cannot work. And since getting sick and not working means getting fired, you will save it and you will wear the holes. The fines are the truly inspired cruelty. They are framed as discipline, little nudges toward excellence, but their real genius is financial. Every penny docked for a late arrival or a wrinkled ribbon is a penny the store collects for work you already did. It is like being charged a fee for the privilege of being underpaid. The modern worker who has stared at a paycheck wondering where a chunk of it went will feel a distant cousin of this ache, except your deductions come with a lecture. And the store has other clever ways to keep the money flowing back inward. You're encouraged, sometimes required, to buy your work clothes from the very store that employs you, at the very prices the store sets. You may be expected to look fashionable in this season's styles, which the store, by happy coincidence, sells upstairs. The wage goes out of one pocket and straight back into another, and the owner gets to feel generous about the whole arrangement, because look, he employs you. He simply also unemploys your money. If you complain, the answer is a shrug and a cue. There are 100 girls outside who would take your post tomorrow, and the owner knows it, and you know he knows it, and he knows you know he knows it. This shared, unspoken knowledge is the quiet hum beneath every interaction in the building. You're replaceable. The position is not, and the math works entirely in his favour. Some workers find ways to stretch a coin until it screams. They share rooms 3 and 4 to a bed, eat the same grey meal until they dream in gruel, and walk everywhere to save the streetcar fare. Others, with no family and no cushion, slide toward darker bargains to make rent, and the store, which prides itself on respectability, looks the other way as long as the smile stays in place during business hours. Respectability, you are learning, is something the store sells to customers, not something it pays for in the back. So you take your pitiful pay, subtract the fines, subtract the uniform, subtract the rent and the bread, and discover that a full week of honest labour has somehow left you precisely where you started, only more tired. It is a remarkable trick. And the truly remarkable thing is that you are expected to perform it looking absolutely magnificent. Here is a delightful contradiction to start your morning. You are paid almost nothing, yet you are required to look as though you are paid quite a lot. The rules are strict. Clean collar, pressed dark dress, tidy hair, no jewellery that suggests fun, and absolutely nothing that hints you might be as poor as you genuinely are. You must look respectable, refined, and effortlessly elegant, all on a budget that does not stretch to a second pair of stockings. So you darn the holes where they will not show, you brush the same dress every single night, and you learn to stand in a way that hides the parts of you that are quietly falling apart. The customers must believe that prosperity is contagious, and that they can catch it simply by buying a hat. The logic from the owner's marble-floored perspective is airtight. A grand store must feel grand from the moment a customer walks in, and that grandness has to extend to the people behind the counters. A shabby clerk reminds the shopper of poverty, and poverty is bad for spending. A polished clerk reminds the shopper of the lovely life she could be living if she just bought the matching gloves. You are, in effect, a piece of the display, a living mannequin who can also wrap parcels and apologise. So you become an expert in the art of looking better off than you are, a skill that has survived intact into the present day, where it is practiced by anyone who has ever ironed the front of a shirt and not the back, because only the front will show on a video call. You learn which side of your dress faces the customer. You learn to pin your collar so the fraying tucks under. You learn to stand behind the counter so the part of your hem that gave up months ago stays safely out of view. Your hands betray you though. Hands always do. A duchess has soft, idle hands. Yours are chapped from cold water, nicked from pins, and stained from handling goods all day. So you keep them moving, busy, useful, anything but still and inspected. You develop a way of presenting merchandise that draws the eye to the silk and away from the fingers holding it. The cruelest part is that the elegance you are forced to perform is the very thing you can least afford. The fashionable dress, the proper boots, the tidy hat, these are not optional. They are the cost of keeping a job that does not pay enough to buy them. So the store has, with a straight face, made looking employable a luxury you must purchase out of your inadequate wage, which means a portion of every paycheck is spent simply on the privilege of being allowed to earn the rest of it. And heaven help you if you fall short. A floor walker who decides your appearance is letting down the tone of the department can send you home to fix it, unpaid, or simply move you to a darker corner where the customers and the commissions are thinner. Your face, your posture, your hem, all of it is on the clock. All of it is judged and none of it is your own. You will watch wealthy customers drift past in clothes that cost more than you earn in a year, and you will smile and admire and recommend, and you will go home to your single candle and your one good dress hanging on a nail, ready for tomorrow. You have learned the first great secret of the palace. Everyone here is performing a fairy tale, and the people paid the least are required to look the part the most. Now, having dressed like a duchess, you may take up your position and stand, and stand, and in case I have not been clear, stand. Now for the part of the job that will haunt your legs into old age, you're not allowed to sit down, not when the floor is empty, not when your feet swell like rising dough, not when the room tilts gently and the chandeliers begin to swim. Chairs exist on the sales floor, but they are strictly for customers, the way a throne is strictly for a king. Sitting is seen as laziness, and laziness is seen as theft of the owner's precious time. Reformers will eventually fight for something radical called a seat for the shop girl, and a few will even win laws demanding it, laws the stores will obey with the enthusiasm of a cat being bathed. But that is years away. Tonight, your feet are entirely on their own. The first hour is fine. The second is fine. Somewhere in the third hour, your feet begin to send up complaints, polite at first, then increasingly desperate, like a committee that has stopped being reasonable. By the fifth hour, your archers have filed a formal grievance. By the eighth, your lower back has joined them, and the two are now bargaining collectively. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, a tiny secret dance, the only movement the floor walker cannot punish, and it helps for about as long as it takes to do. You quickly learn the geography of relief. There is a counter edge you can lean a hip against if you angle yourself just so, making it look like attentive posture rather than collapse. There is a stockroom you can volunteer to visit, not because anything needs fetching, but because for 30 glorious seconds no one can see you, and you can lean your whole weeping body against a shelf and remember what it is to be vertical without agony. These small mercies become the secret architecture of your day. The modern body, accustomed to the radical luxury of chairs, can barely imagine it. Picture standing in one spot from the moment you wake until the moment the sun gives up, with no lunch break worthy of the name, no stool, no relief, smiling the entire time. Now do it again tomorrow. Now do it for years. The shop girls of this era developed a particular flavour of misery. Varicose veins, swollen ankles, chronic pain, fainting spells that doctors of the day actually wrote about with concern, and that the stores actually ignored with discipline. Fainting was common enough to have a routine. A girl would go pale, sway and fold, and her neighbours would catch her, prop her in the stockroom for a few minutes, and return her to her post before the floor walker noticed the gap. There was no sympathy in it, only logistics. An empty counter was a problem, and a collapsed co-worker was an empty counter. You learn to recognise the signs in others and in yourself, the grey creeping in at the edges, and you learn to lock your knees and breathe and outlast it, because the alternative is a mark in the little leather book. When reformers eventually take up your cause, demanding that stores provide seats and even let women use them, the stores will fight as though asked to surrender the building. They will install chairs to satisfy the new laws, and then make it understood that any girl who uses one will be remembered, and not fondly. A chair you are forbidden to sit in is not a kindness. It is a taunt with legs. So you stand. You stand through the morning rush and the afternoon lull and the evening crush. You stand until standing stops being something you do and becomes something done to you. And as you stand, you begin to notice that someone is always watching to make sure you keep doing it. That someone has a name an immaculate suit, and a little book, and you're about to become very, very aware of him. Allow me to introduce the floor walker, a man in an immaculate suit whose entire job is to glide silently across the sales floor and notice everything you would rather he did not. He is part manager, part hall monitor, part bird of prey. He decides who gets the good counters and who gets banished to the basement. He can dock your pay, end your day, or end your career with a single disapproving glance and a note in a little leather book. To the customers he bows and beams. To you he is a weather system, and the forecast is always a chance of doom. The trick to surviving him is simple and impossible. Be invisible while working perfectly, and never ever let him catch you leaning. You will learn his footsteps before you learn his face. The floor is loud with the murmur of commerce, but the floor walker has particular tread, unhurried, deliberate, the walk of a man who is never late because everyone else is always early for him. When that tread approaches, a small electric current runs down the line of clerks. Spines straighten, smiles brighten, hands find something to do. He is the human embodiment of the feeling you get when the boss walks behind your desk, except he does it 40 times a day and carries the power to send you home hungry. His genius is in the catching. He does not stand and bark. That would be inelegant, and elegance is the whole point. Instead, he drifts. He pauses. He appears to be admiring a display while in fact cataloguing your every sin. The yawn you thought you hid, the hip resting against the counter, the half-second your smile slipped while a customer berated you, the friendly word you exchange with a girl at the next counter, which counts as gossip, which counts as theft of time, which counts against you. He gathers these small crimes and deposits them in his book, and the book is the closest thing in your life to fate. To the customers, of course, he is a different creature entirely. He bows, he soothes, he materializes the instant a wealthy woman looks the least bit unattended, and personally escorts her through her purchase as though guiding visiting royalty. If she has a complaint, he sides with her instantly and completely, often at your expense, because the customer is a source of money and you are a source of cost, and he has never once been confused about which is which. You will be corrected in front of shoppers, gently and with a smile, for things that were not your fault, and you will say thank you, because the alternative is the book. The maddening truth is that the floor walker is not free either. He has his own floor walker, in the form of a manager, who has the owner, who has the ledger, which rules them all. He polices you because he is being policed, and the fear runs all the way up the marble staircase, thinning as it climbs. He guards the tone of the department because his job depends on the tone of the department, and so he becomes a small tyrant in a borrowed suit, passing his anxiety downhill onto you, where it can go no further because you are the bottom. So you master the art of being seen working and never seen resting. You develop a sixth sense for his approach, a smile you can summon in a quarter second, a way of looking permanently, productively busy even in the dead middle of a dead afternoon. It is exhausting in a way standing all day somehow is not. The constant low hum of being watched, and he is not even the worst of the watchers. Because somewhere on this floor, dressed exactly like a shopper, browsing exactly like a shopper, is someone whose entire job is to suspect you of being a criminal. Every palace has its spies, and yours are the store detectives, who wander the floor disguised as ordinary shoppers, fingering scarves they will never buy while watching everyone who actually might. Their quarry is the shoplifter, a creature the store both fears and in a strange way depends upon, because nothing tightens a manager's grip on the staff like the suspicion that goods are walking out the door. You, of course, are a suspect too. A clerk who handles money and merchandise all day is watched as closely as any customer, and a single missing spool of thread can become an interrogation. So you keep your hands visible, your pockets empty, and your conscience louder than strictly necessary. Because in this building, looking innocent is nearly as important as being it. The store detective is a genuinely new kind of person, invented more or less for this exact moment in history. The open, abundant, touch-everything design of the department store, the very thing that delights customers, is also a thief's paradise. For the first time, goods are out in the open, piled high, within easy reach, instead of locked behind a counter and handed over one at a time by a watchful clerk. The store wants you to handle the merchandise, to fall in love with it, to feel that it is already yours. The trouble is that some people take that feeling a little too literally, so the store hires watchers who look like nobody at all. That is the whole craft. A good store detective is forgettable, a woman who could be anyone's aunt, a man who could be waiting for his wife, blending into the crowd while their eyes do quiet, relentless work. They are looking for the telltale signs, the lingering near a counter, the too casual glance over the shoulder, the coat held at a curious angle, the hand that dips and rises a beat too quickly. It is the same surveillance you walk through in any large shop today, only now it is done by a person in a hat instead of a camera in a dome, and frankly, the person in the hat is having a better time. Here is the part nobody tells you on your first day. You're being watched just as hard as the customers, possibly harder. You handle goods constantly. You make change all day. You have 1,000 opportunities to slip a coin or a ribbon into a pocket, and the store assumes, as a matter of policy, that you are tempted to take every one of them. A clerk under suspicion has no real defense. An accusation alone can end you, no proof required, because the store does not need to convict you, it only needs to replace you, and there is that queue outside again. So you become careful in ways that would look paranoid anywhere else. You make change with theatrical clarity, counting it out loud, letting every coin be seen. You never put your hands where they cannot be observed. You keep your own purse small and your pockets famously empty. When a customer hands you money and then claims you gave back the wrong change, you have learned to narrate the entire transaction like a court reporter, because your honesty is the only currency you own, and it can be spent in a single false word. The deepest irony is that the store has built a building specifically designed to make people want to take things. Lush, open, overflowing with desire, and then is shocked, simply shocked, when people occasionally take them. It manufactures temptation by the acre, and then hires an army to punish it. And the war it wages catches the rich and the poor very differently indeed, which brings us to one of the most beautifully unfair arrangements you will ever witness. Here is where the story turns deliciously, infuriatingly unfair. When a poor woman is caught slipping a ribbon into her sleeve, she is a thief, hauled off, shamed, and punished. But when a wealthy woman in furs is caught doing the exact same thing, doctors gather, stroke their beards, and diagnose her with a fashionable new illness, kleptomania, a helpless compulsion that apparently only afflicts ladies who could easily have paid. The grand stores, terrified of offending their richest customers, often play right along, quietly returning the stolen goods and walking the offender to her carriage with a polite bow. Same crime, same lace gloves, wildly different endings. You will watch this happen and say nothing, because pointing it out is also somehow against the rules. Let's appreciate the sheer architecture of the double standard. A working woman takes a small item, perhaps out of genuine need, perhaps out of a single weak moment after a week of being treated like furniture, and the full weight of the building falls on her. She is detained, searched, perhaps handed to the police, certainly publicly disgraced. Her name is ruined, her job is gone, and the store makes an example of her precisely because she has no power to fight back. Meanwhile, a banker's wife is observed tucking an expensive trinket into her muff, and the entire apparatus of respectability rushes to protect her. She cannot be a thief, you see, because thieves steal out of want, and she wants for nothing. Therefore her theft must be a symptom, a delicate nervous affliction, a fashionable disorder of the modern feminine mind, overstimulated by all this dazzling abundance. The poor woman has a crime, the rich woman has a condition. The poor woman gets a cell, the rich woman gets a diagnosis and a sympathetic note from her physician. The stores did not stumble into this hypocrisy by accident. They embraced it as policy, because the math, as always, ruled the marble. A wealthy customer caught stealing was still a wealthy customer, the kind whose annual spending could outweigh 100 stolen trinkets. Humiliate her, and you lose her. And worse, you lose her entire circle of equally wealthy friends, who will be appalled that your store would treat one of their own like a common criminal. So the store eats the loss, smiles, returns the merchandise, and books the whole affair under the cost of keeping the rich happy. The modern eye recognizes this instantly, because it never went away. Justice has always been a sliding scale calibrated to the thickness of one's purse, and the department store simply put the scale on display under good lighting. This same act, judged not by what was done but by who did it, then dressed up in the language of medicine to make the unfairness sound scientific. It is one of the more honest moments in an institution built on illusion, a rare instant when the store accidentally shows you exactly how the world is sorted. You, behind your counter, see all of it. You see the trembling shop girl led away in tears for a theft worth less than a meal. You see the grand lady patted on the hand and guided gently to her waiting carriage for a theft worth a month of your wages. You see which one the store fears and which one it can afford to crush. And you keep your face perfectly pleasant throughout, because you have learned the most important survival skill in the whole palace, which is to witness an injustice in total silence while folding ribbon. It is excellent training, as it happens, for the customers themselves, who are about to teach you that being right is a privilege reserved entirely for the people holding the money. Somewhere in these years, a slogan is born that will outlive every person who ever heard it. The customer is always right. It sounds charming. In practice, it means the customer is allowed to be wrong, loud, cruel, and entirely unpleasant, and you are required to thank them for the privilege. A woman may shout at you over a price you did not set, return a dress she has obviously worn to a wedding, and accuse you of stupidity in front of a crowd, and your only permitted response is a serene smile and the word certainly. The philosophy is brilliant for business and brutal for the human being behind the counter. You're not a person today, you're a service, and services do not get to have feelings. On paper, the slogan was a kind of revolution. For centuries, shopkeepers had treated customers with suspicion, assuming the worst, guarding the goods, arguing over every coin. The merchant kings flipped it completely. Trust the customer, flatter the customer, give the customer the benefit of every doubt, and the customer will reward you with loyalty and a wide open purse. As a business strategy, it was a stroke of genius, and the wealth it generated proved it. As a daily experience for the person actually facing the customer, it was a slow grind of indignity. Because the unspoken second half of the slogan was always there, hanging in the air like perfume. The customer is always right, which means the clerk is always available to be wrong. Every dispute had a predetermined loser, and that loser was you. When a shopper insisted she had handed you a larger note than she had, the store sided with her. When she returned a clearly used item demanding her money back, the store refunded her and frowned at you. When she was simply having a bad day and decided to spend it being vicious, to whoever was paid least to absorb it, you were that person, and your job was to take it with grace. You learn the serene smile fast, because the serene smile is your armor. It is the face that says, "I'm so terribly sorry for your inconvenience," while the inside of your skull is screaming. You learn the soft, agreeable words that end conflicts without ever defending yourself, because defending yourself is forbidden. The customer can raise her voice. You cannot. The customer can be unreasonable. You must be a saint. The customer can call you names in front of a gathering crowd, and you will lower your eyes and offer to fetch the very item she's wrong about. Anyone who has worked a register, a phone line, or a front desk in the modern world knows this exact ache. The particular exhaustion of being professionally pleasant to someone actively unpleasant, of swallowing a perfectly reasonable retort because the rules forbid it and the rent requires it. That ache is over 100 years old, and it was born right here in a marble palace, under a slogan that sounds like kindness and functions like a muzzle. The cruelty is sharpened by the audience. The floor walker is watching to make sure you stay sweet. The other customers are watching to see how you handle it. Your co-workers are watching with sympathy they cannot show. And the customer, gloriously, is performing for all of them. Because nothing emboldens a certain kind of person like the knowledge that the other party is not allowed to fight back. So you smile, you soothe, you say certainly, and you let the insult roll off the polished surface you have made of your own face. You're very good at it by now. You have had to be. And the strangest part is that the store will use this same patient, smiling, defenseless version of you as a weapon, because everything around you, every shelf and light and scent, has been arranged to turn that pleasantness into profit. Take a slow look around the sales floor, because almost nothing you see is an accident. The most tempting goods sit precisely at eye level. The essentials, the things people actually came in for, are tucked at the very back, so you must walk past 100 small temptations to reach them. There are no clocks, no easy windows, no quick way out, because a shopper who forgets the time and the weather is a shopper who keeps spending. The lighting flatters, the music soothes, and the scent in the air is chosen to make wallets feel generous. It is an early, elegant form of mind control dressed up as customer service, and the unsettling part is just how well it works. You will fall for it yourself on your one day off. Begin with the layout, because the layout is the oldest trick and still the best. The store wants you to wander, so the store makes wandering unavoidable. The everyday necessities, the thread, the stockings, the plain practical things live at the back and the top floors. To reach them you are marched past silk and scent and jewellery, and 1,000 pretty things you had no intention of buying when you walked in. By the time you arrive at the boring item you actually needed, you are carrying 3 lovely items you did not. Every grocery store that buries the milk at the very back of the building is quoting this exact playbook 100 years later, word for word. Now consider what is missing. There are no clocks on the sales floor, and there are remarkably few windows, and the few that exist are dressed and shuttered so you never quite see the daylight. This is deliberate to the point of genius. A shopper who can see the time remembers her appointments. A shopper who can see the weather remembers she meant to be home before dark. A shopper sealed inside a warm, glowing, timeless bubble forgets both and keeps drifting, counter to counter, hour to hour, in a pleasant fog of want. The modern casino learned this lesson from the department store and never gives the clock back either. Then there is the assault on the senses, all of it engineered. The lighting is tuned to make skin look healthy, fabric look rich, and faces look hopeful. The same warm, flattering glow a dressing room mirror uses today to convince you that yes, you do look wonderful in this. You should absolutely buy it. The air is scented, often near the entrance and the perfume counters, so that the very first breath inside the building smells like luxury and possibility. Soft sound fills the spaces, calming the nerves, slowing the step, soothing the part of the brain that might otherwise ask whether you can afford any of this. And then there is you. You are part of the machine too, the warmest part. A friendly, attentive, beautifully dressed clerk who remembers a customer's name and admires her taste is worth more than any window display, because trust loosens a purse faster than anything else. The store has trained you, fed you to the customers, and arranged you among the goods precisely because a human smile sells what a price tag cannot. You're the most sophisticated instrument on the floor, and you're paid the least to be it. The genuinely unsettling realization, the one that arrives on your day off, is that knowing the trick does not break it. You will walk into a store, any store, and feel the warm pull, the soft forgetting, the gentle conviction that you need the thing at eye level, and you will reach for it even as some tired corner of your mind whispers that you sell this feeling for a living. The palace does not care that you know how it works. It was never an argument. It was always a spell, and you, like everyone else, are only human. Which is exactly what they are counting on. Step outside for a moment, into the cold, and look at the great glass windows facing the street, because this is where the store does its dreaming out loud. Behind the spotless panes, an artist has built an entire tiny world. A frozen ballroom, a seaside scene, a Christmas morning so perfect it never actually existed. The mannequins stand poised in clothes you could never afford, living lives you're invited to envy. Crowds gather on the pavement just to stare, their breath fogging the glass, wanting something they cannot quite name. That wanting is the whole point. The window does not sell a coat. It sells a feeling, and feelings, it turns out, are the most profitable product in the entire building. You helped dress that mannequin this morning. You went home to a single candle. The window is a recent invention, and a sly one. For most of history, a shop window was just a hole you stacked goods behind so people knew you sold things. The merchant kings looked at that hole and saw a stage. They hired artists, real ones, the kind who could have painted portraits or designed sets for the theatre, and set them loose to build little fantasies in glass. The job became so important that these window dressers were paid well and guarded jealously, because a brilliant window could stop 1,000 people in their tracks, and a stopped person is halfway to a buying person. What they were really selling through the glass was not the merchandise, but the life the merchandise implied. The hat was not a hat. It was the elegant afternoon you would have while wearing it. The dining set was not china. It was the warm, admired family that would gather around it. The store had figured out something that advertising still runs on today, that people do not buy objects. They buy the better version of themselves that the object seems to promise. Every glowing phone advertisement and perfectly staged catalogue photograph is the direct grandchild of these windows, the same lie told with newer lighting. And the crowds came. In the evenings, after the doors had closed, people would stroll along the storefronts just to look, an entire pastime built around staring at things you could not have. They called it window shopping, a phrase so gentle it disguises what it really is, the deliberate cultivation of longing in people who cannot afford to satisfy it. The store did not mind that most of the gazers would never buy. The longing itself was the harvest. Plant enough of it in enough chests, and some of it would eventually walk through the doors and open a purse. You know the cruelest layer of it, because you built it. That morning, before the floor opened, you were sent to help arrange the very window the crowd now admires. You pinned the gown, you angled the gloves, you positioned the mannequin in its frozen moment of effortless grace. You handled with your chapped and pin-nicked hands a life you will never live, staged it perfectly, stepped back, and then went to stand all day selling buttons. The dream in the window is one you assembled and will never be allowed to enter. So you stand on the cold pavement for a moment on your way home, in the small crowd, and you let yourself look too. The light is warm behind the glass. The little world is perfect. And for just a second the spell catches even you, the person who built it, which is how you know exactly how well it works. Then the cold reminds you of the candle waiting at home, and you walk on. The window will still be glowing long after you're asleep, quietly doing its job, which is to make sure that tomorrow the crowds come back. There is a special kind of madness reserved for the day the store announces a sale, and you should brace yourself now, because nothing in your training prepares you for it. The doors open, and a tide of humanity pours in, elbows first, hats askew, all sweetness abandoned at the threshold. The bargain basement becomes a battlefield where respectable ladies wrestle over remnants, and a single markdown coat can spark a small, well-dressed riot. You will be jostled, shouted at, and occasionally climbed over. The store knows exactly what it is doing. The cheap goods are bait, and the frenzy they create loosens every purse in the building. By closing time, the floor looks like a storm passed through it, and in a sense, one did. It begins before dawn. By the time you arrive for your shift, a line has already formed outside, women bundled against the cold, clutching their purses, watching the doors with the focused intensity of hunters. They have seen the advertisement in the morning paper, the one screaming about prices slashed and quantities limited, and they have done the arithmetic of desire. There will not be enough, and they intend to be among the few who get theirs. The store engineered that exact thought. Scarcity is the most reliable accelerant ever discovered, and a sale is simply scarcity with a megaphone. When the doors open, civilization politely excuses itself. The same genteel ladies who, on an ordinary day, would faint at the suggestion of unseemly behaviour now drive shoulders into ribs to reach a table of discounted linen. Hats are knocked askew. Gloves grab the same garment from opposite ends and refuse to let go. Voices that have spent a lifetime being soft and decorous discover surprising new volume. You watch a woman who looks like somebody's gentle grandmother win a tug of war over a coat through sheer, terrifying conviction, and you make a private note never to underestimate anyone again. Your job in all this is to survive while remaining pleasant, a combination roughly as easy as smiling during an avalanche. You ring up sales as fast as your hands will move. You referee disputes you have no authority to settle. You retrieve items from the floor where they have been flung, and you absorb the frustration of every shopper who arrived a moment too late for the thing she crossed the city to claim. The crowd presses against your counter like a tide against a pier, and you simply have to hold. The genius of the whole spectacle, the part that should make you tip your bruised hat to the merchant kings, is that the discounted goods are not really the product. They are the lure. The store loses a little money on the cheap coats and the slashed linen, and it does so gladly, because the frenzy pulls in thousands of people who came for the bargain and stay for everything else. A woman who fought her way in for a marked down remnant walks out having also bought, in the heat of the moment, 3 full-price items she never planned to look at. The sale is a loss leader, a small wound the store inflicts on itself to open a much larger vein in everyone else. By closing, the floor is wreckage, tables overturned, goods strewn, displays demolished, and a staff of clerks who look like they have returned from a small foreign war. You will spend an hour restoring order to a department that took 30 seconds to destroy, and you will do it on the same aching feet, with the same fixed smile, for the same handful of fined and dwindling coins. The customers go home triumphant with their spoils. You go home flattened, and you go home knowing the secret the crowd never sees, which is that nobody won that battle except the man whose name is on the door, and every coin they handed you, by the way, did not stay in your drawer for long. Watch what happens when a customer finally pays. You do not simply take the money and make change. That would be far too sensible. Instead, the cash and the bill are whisked away to a central office, either carried at a flat run by a small breathless boy or, in the grander stores, sucked up into a brass tube and fired through the ceiling on a hiss of compressed air. Moments later, the change comes whistling back down. It is a genuine marvel of engineering, built for one cold reason. The owner does not trust a single one of you with a drawer full of money. Every coin in the building must flow through one heavily watched room, because in a palace this size, temptation is everywhere, and so is the arithmetic. The system, once you understand it, is almost beautiful, in the way a very elegant prison is almost beautiful. A customer hands you payment. You write up the sale, tuck the money and the slip into a small container, and load it into a brass canister roughly the size of a fat sausage. You push it into a tube. There is a hungry thunk and a rush of air, and the canister vanishes upward into a network of pipes that snake through the ceiling of the entire building, all of them leading to a single secret room where the real money lives. There, a cashier checks your math, makes the change, and fires the canister back, and it drops onto your counter as if delivered by a particularly punctual ghost. Before the tubes, the same job was done by children. Cash boys and cash girls, small and fast, would snatch the money from your hand and sprint across the floor to the central desk, dodging shoppers, and sprint back with the change. All day, for hours, their little legs the original delivery system. The brass tubes were, in a sense, an upgrade that replaced exhausted children with compressed air, which tells you almost everything you need to know about how the store viewed the difference between the two. But marvel as you might at the engineering, never lose sight of the reason it exists. It is not for speed. A competent clerk with a cash drawer is perfectly fast. It is for control. The owner has looked at his hundreds of employees, each handling money all day long, and concluded as a matter of settled policy that every one of them is a thief in waiting. So he removes the money from your hands as quickly as possible and routes all of it through one room he can watch like a hawk. You never hold a full drawer because you're never trusted with one. The whole whistling, hissing system is a monument to suspicion, dressed up as modern convenience. The modern shopper has met this logic without recognizing it. Every time a register prints a receipt that must match a sealed drawer counted by a manager, every time a self-checkout accuses you of an unexpected item in the bagging area, the same cold assumption is humming underneath. The people and the customers cannot be trusted, so the money must be watched by the machine. The brass tube was simply the first version with a satisfying sound effect. There is admittedly one small pleasure in it. On a slow afternoon, when the floor is quiet and the floor walker is elsewhere, there is something genuinely delightful about loading a canister, hearing that thunk, and watching it disappear into the ceiling like a letter to the heavens. It is the closest thing to magic in your whole day. Then you remember it exists because no one believes you would not steal, and the magic curdles slightly. Still, it whistles. And speaking of a marvels designed to keep customers gliding past the merchandise, wait until you see what they have done to the staircase. Allow me to present the most modern wonder in the entire store, a staircase that moves all by itself, carrying customers smoothly from floor to floor like so much luggage. The escalator is a genuine marvel, and it is also, to the average shopper of 1902, an object of pure terror. People hesitate at the bottom, convinced the moving steps will swallow their skirts, their canes, or their lives. Some stores actually station an attendant at the top, with a glass of brandy and a bottle of smelling salts to revive the riders who arrive trembling. The owners adore the contraption anyway, not only because it looks impressive, but because a person gliding gently upward past floor after floor of merchandise is a person being shown everything the store would very much like to sell them. Try to imagine seeing one for the first time. You've spent your entire life understanding stairs as a fixed and honest thing, an arrangement of steps that stays politely still while you climb it. Now you are confronted with a staircase that is alive, its steps emerging from the floor, flattening, sliding upward, and vanishing again at the top into a slot that, to a nervous mind, looks distinctly like a mouth. Of course, people panicked. The wonder is that anyone got on at all. The stores understood the fear and turned it into theatre. At the top of the moving stairs they would post an attendant, often a kindly-looking person, whose job was to receive the shaken riders, steady them by the elbow, and offer a reviving sip of brandy or a sniff of smelling salts to those who had made the journey badly. It sounds like mockery, but it was marketing. Nothing draws a crowd like a spectacle, and a person being gently revived after surviving the moving staircase was free advertising, a little drama playing out all day at the top of the store. Come see the future, it said, it is only slightly fatal. There were genuine dangers, to be fair to the frightened. Long skirts and trailing hems could catch in the mechanism. Loose laces, canes, the trailing edge of a coat, all of it could be drawn into the gap where the steps disappeared. Early riders learned, sometimes the hard way, to step on and off with care, to gather their skirts, to mind the teeth at the top and bottom. The fear was exaggerated, but it was not invented. The machine really would eat your hem if you let it, and occasionally it did. But the merchant kings did not install moving staircases to be kind to tired legs, whatever they claimed. They installed them because an escalator is a slow, irresistible tour of the entire store. An elevator whisks a customer to a chosen floor and skips everything in between, which is terrible for business. An escalator drags her upward at a gentle, browsing pace, past every counter, every display, every tempting thing on every level, depositing her by clever design far from the next set of stairs, so she must walk through yet more merchandise to continue her ascent. It is a conveyor belt for desire, and the customer rides it willingly, even gratefully, having no idea she's being processed. The modern shopper rides the same machine and feels none of the terror and all of the manipulation. You glide up through the bright floors of any large store today, past the things you did not come for, and somewhere a tired ghost in 1902 is nodding, because it was always the plan. The terror faded within a generation. People stopped fainting and started commuting, but the deeper purpose never changed. The staircase still moves you, in every sense, exactly where the store wants you to go, and it moves you through a building that, for all its marble and wonder, was a great deal more dangerous than anyone admitted. Now we come to a part of the story that deserves to be told plainly, without a single joke. For all their marble and gold, these enormous stores were dangerous places. They were packed wall to wall with the most flammable goods imaginable, lit by open gas flame, crowded with hundreds of workers and thousands of customers, and built before anyone took fire safety seriously. Stairwells were narrow, exits were few, and some doors were kept locked to discourage theft, trapping the very people the store relied upon. When fire broke out in buildings like these, the results could be horrific, and the workers, mostly young women, paid the highest price of all. The grandeur you have admired all day was quite literally built on top of enormous risk. Consider what these buildings actually held. Floor after floor of cotton, linen, silk, wool and lace. Wooden counters, wooden floors, wooden display cases, paper, ribbon, packaging, and dust. Almost everything inside the palace was something that would burn fast and burn hot, and all of it was arranged in dense, beautiful piles across enormous open floors. A single spark in the wrong place could find more fuel than it could ever use, and there were sparks. The buildings were lit and sometimes heated by open flame, gas jets and lamps whose small fires flickered near all that fabric every hour the store was open. Electric lighting was arriving, but it was new, imperfect, and its early wiring carried its own hazards. The means of disaster were present in every room, every day, woven into the ordinary running of the place. What made the danger so much worse was the design. These were buildings built to impress, not to protect. Grand spaces and narrow service stairs, few clearly marked exits, crowds of people who did not know the building moving through floors they had never navigated. and in too many cases doors that were locked or blocked, sometimes to control the flow of customers, sometimes to stop theft by workers, with little thought given to what those locked doors would mean in an emergency. The same suspicion that fired money through brass tubes also at times sealed the exits. The people most exposed were the workers, and most of them were young women, the very shop girls and seamstresses and cash girls, whose labour held the whole enterprise up. They worked long hours deep inside these buildings, on upper floors, behind those narrow stairs and locked doors. When fire came to crowded workplaces of this era, the death tolls could be terrible, and the victims were overwhelmingly the young, the poor and the female, the people with the least power to demand safety and the most reason to fear losing their jobs if they did. It would take disaster, repeated and public and grievous, to force change. Out of the worst of these tragedies came the fire codes, the required exits, the unlocked doors, the inspections, the safety laws that the modern world now takes entirely for granted. Every clearly marked exit sign, every door that pushes open from the inside, every sprinkler and fire escape exists because at some point people died for the lack of it, and someone insisted that it never happen again. So when you stand in the middle of the dazzling floor and feel the warmth and the beauty of the palace, hold this quietly in your mind as well. The grandeur was real, and so was the peril beneath it. The workers who filled these buildings carried a risk they did not choose, and were rarely allowed to refuse. They deserved to be remembered not only as part of the spectacle, but as people, and the safety we now expect was paid for, in part, by those who did not survive the places that were never built to keep them safe. When your shift finally ends, you may discover that the store's grip does not loosen at the door. In many of these establishments, especially those modelled on the older British system, the workers do not go home, because the store is home. You sleep in a crowded dormitory the company owns, eat the food the company provides, and live under a thicket of rules that would shame a convent. Lights out by a set hour, no visitors, no leaving without permission, fines for the smallest sin. It is sold to your family as protection, a respectable roof over a young woman's head. In practice, it means the store controls your wages, your meals, your bed, and your every waking hour. You did not just take a job, you moved in. The arrangement was called living in, and to the families who sent their daughters into it, it sounded almost like a blessing. A young woman alone in a great city was a source of constant worry, vulnerable to every danger the imagination could supply. The store offered an answer that soothed every fear. She would be housed, fed, supervised, and kept respectable, all under the watchful eye of the same institution that employed her. What loving parent could object to that? Many were grateful. The reality inside the dormitory was a great deal less reassuring. The rooms were crowded, the beds were close, and privacy was a word from another life. A bell told you when to rise, and a bell told you when the lights went out, and in between, your hours not spent standing on the sales floor were governed by a rulebook of impressive length and pettiness. No followers, meaning no suitors, no going out after a certain hour, no visitors in your room, a clean and tidy bed by inspection, a list of small offences, each carrying its own small fine deducted naturally from the wage you had barely earned. The arithmetic of it was the genius of it. The store paid you little, then took back a portion for your board and lodging, then took back more in fines for breaking the rules of the lodging it controlled. Your wage was not so much money as a number on a page that the store moved from one column to another, mostly back toward itself. You could work a full week and find that you owned, in actual coin you could hold, almost nothing, because nearly everything you earned had been spent within the walls of the institution that earned it for you. It was a closed loop, and you lived inside it, and the control didn't stop at money, when your employer is also your landlord, also your cook, also your moral supervisor, also the keeper of the only roof you have. The threat of dismissal becomes total. Lose your job and you lose your home and your meals in the same instant. You're turned out into the street the same afternoon you are let go. This made workers careful, quiet and obedient in a way that no mere wage ever could, because the cost of displeasing the store was not just poverty, it was homelessness by sundown. The modern worker has met softer versions of this trap: the company town, the employer-tied housing, the job that owns just a little too much of your life, the arrangement where leaving cost you far more than just the paycheck. The living-in system was the unvarnished original, a frank admission that the store wished to own not just your labour, but your hours, your habits, and your bed. So when the floor finally clears and the great doors are locked for the night, you do not walk out into your own life. You climb the back stairs to a narrow bed in a room full of other tired women, all of you employed, housed, fed, and quietly imprisoned by the same smiling institution. The palace closes for the night, and you, its smallest part, simply stay inside it. And in the morning, the bell will ring, and you will go down to a floor where even smaller workers are already running. Look down, and you will see the smallest workers in the whole grand machine, the cash boys and cash girls, children barely tall enough to see over a counter, darting between the clerks and the cashier's office with money and parcels clutched in their hands. They run for 12 hours a day, learning to be invisible, paid even less than you, which you would not have believed possible until this very morning. Some are here because their families are desperate. Some are here instead of a school they will never see. The store likes them because they are fast, cheap, and too young to argue. You will watch one of them fall asleep standing up against a marble pillar at the end of the night, and you will understand exactly how he feels. They are everywhere once you start to notice them, and the store has arranged things so that you mostly do not. A child appears at your elbow the moment a sale is made, takes the money in the slip, and is gone across the floor before you finish thanking the customer, returning minutes later with the change. Another carries wrapped parcels to the delivery desk. Another runs messages between departments. They move at a half-run all day, weaving through the legs of shoppers, learning the entire vast building by heart, because a slow cash boy is a useless cash boy, and a useless one is sent home. They're here for the oldest and saddest reason. Their families need the coins. A child's wage, tiny as it is, can be the difference between a household making rent and not. So a boy of 9 or 10 is sent into the great store to run until his legs ache, and the small money he brings home matters more to his family than the schooling he's missing, because hunger is immediate and education is a luxury for people who can afford to wait. It is not that the families do not love their children. It is that poverty does not leave room for the choices love would make. The store, for its part, has no such conflict. It employs children because children are cheap, because their small hands and quick feet suit the work, and because they are far too young and far too frightened to make demands. A grown clerk might one day complain about wages or hours. A child simply does as he is told and is grateful for the place. To the ledger, this is not cruelty. It is efficiency, and the ledger does not have a conscience to trouble. You see what the long days do to them. You see the ones who started bright and chattering grow quiet and grey over the weeks. You see them rubbing their eyes in the late hours, see them lean against a pillar for a stolen moment of rest. See one of them, near closing, fall asleep on his feet entirely, still upright, simply switched off by exhaustion, until a clerk gently shakes him awake before the floorwalker can. There is no childhood in it, only labour wearing a child's shape. It would take many years and a great deal of patient, stubborn effort by reformers to drag children out of workplaces like this one, to build the laws that say the young belong in schools and not on shop floors, to decide as a society that a child's labour is not a thing to be bought. Those protections, like so many others in this story, were not granted freely. They were fought for against people who profited from things staying exactly as they were. So when you watch the smallest worker in the store slump against the cold marble at the end of a long day, do not look away too quickly. He is part of this palace too, the part the windows never show and the customers never count. The grandeur ran on his small running feet, and he was paid in pennies and exhaustion. Remember him, and remember too that everything he carried began somewhere else. In rooms the store worked very hard to keep you from imagining. Before the silk reaches your counter and the customer coos over it, it passes through a world the store works very hard to keep you from imagining. Much of the beautiful merchandise stacked around you was made in crowded workshops and tenement rooms, often by women and children, for wages even lower than your own, in conditions that range from grim to deadly. The finished goods arrive clean and gleaming, with no trace of the hands that made them. That is entirely by design. A palace this dazzling depends on you not picturing the rooms where the dazzle is stitched together. It is worth pausing here, just for a moment, to remember those workers, because the history of these stores is also their history, and they are far too easy to forget. The clothing that fills the great store does not begin in the great store. It begins in the garment trade, in workrooms scattered across the poorer districts of the city, where the actual sewing is done by people the customer will never see. Some of these were proper factories, many were not. A great deal of the work was done in tenement apartments, where entire families bent over needles and machines in cramped rooms, paid by the piece, racing the clock because the only way to earn enough was to never stop. The conditions in these places were often brutal, long hours stretching from early morning deep into the night, wages so low that whole families had to work to survive on them, air thick with cloth dust and lint, crowded rooms with poor light, poor ventilation, and little regard for the safety of the people inside. Children worked alongside adults, their small fingers useful for fine tasks, their childhood spent in the same exhausting labour. The garment workers, many of them immigrant women, carried the weight of the whole bright industry on backs that bent over the work until they ached. And the danger was not only exhaustion. These crowded workrooms, full of fabric and people and few safe exits, carried the same terrible fire risks that haunted the stores themselves, and the consequences when disaster struck were among the most grievous in the history of American labour. The making of beautiful things took place too often in conditions that endangered the very lives of those who made them. The store's relationship to all of this was one of careful distance. The merchandise arrived finished, pressed and perfect, with no label describing the room it came from, or the hands that sewed it. The buyer at the store negotiated for the lowest price, and the low price was made possible by the low wages paid far up the chain, in workrooms the store never had to look at and the customer never had to know about. Everyone in the bright palace could enjoy the abundance without confronting its cost, because the cost had been paid somewhere else, by someone else, out of sight. This is not a comfortable thing to sit with, and it should not be. The same distance still exists today, only stretched across oceans rather than city blocks. The garment that arrives clean and cheap and lovely still, very often, conceals the conditions of the people who made it, and the comfort of not knowing is still quietly part of what is being sold. The pattern the department store perfected, abundance here made possible by hardship out of view, did not end. It simply travelled. So as you handle the silk and praise it and pass it across the counter, hold a thought for the rooms it came from and the people who sat in them. They were workers too, part of this same story, and they deserve to be more than the invisible foundation beneath someone else's luxury. The palace was beautiful. It is right to remember what its beauty was built upon. And then, because the work continues, the busiest and brightest season of all comes rushing in. If you think the ordinary days are exhausting, wait until the season of joy arrives, because Christmas is when the great store reaches the very peak of its powers and you reach the very bottom of your stamina. The windows fill with snow and wonder. A man in a red suit is installed to delight the children, and the whole building becomes a glittering engine of holiday spending. For the customers it is pure magic. For you it is a blur of 14-hour days, swollen feet, endless crowds, and a cheerful smile you must keep nailed to your face long after it has stopped meaning anything. The store will make more money in these few weeks than in months of ordinary trade, and almost none of it will ever find its way to the people making the magic happen. The transformation is genuinely astonishing to witness. Overnight the palace puts on its finest costume. Garlands appear, lights twinkle, the windows become miniature winter wonderlands so enchanting that the evening crowds outside grow 3 deep. A grotto is built somewhere on an upper floor, and into it is installed a jolly man in red, whose sole purpose is to enchant children, and, not incidentally, to lure entire families up through every floor of merchandise to reach him. It is the window trick, scaled up to the size of a holiday, and aimed squarely at the one thing no parent can resist, which is a child's delight. The store, in fact, more or less invented the Christmas you now think of as timeless. The lavish displays, the gift-giving frenzy, the seasonal magic, the man in red as the centerpiece of a shopping expedition. Much of it was shaped and amplified by these great stores precisely because the season was so spectacularly profitable. They taught a whole culture that love was best expressed through purchases, and then they stood ready, gleaming and garlanded, to sell the love back to it by the armful. It worked beyond anyone's dreams, and it has never stopped working, as anyone who has stood in a December checkout line can wearily confirm. For you, behind the counter, the magic has a very different texture. The crowds that delight the owner are a tide that does not recede for weeks. The shortened tempers of stressed shoppers land as always on the person paid least to absorb them. The days stretch longer and longer as the season peaks, the store staying open late to capture every last possible sale, and your feet, already your oldest enemies, reach new frontiers of pain. You wrap parcel after parcel. You smile through the 100th difficult customer. You keep the cheer pinned to your face by sheer will, because nothing sours a holiday display like a clerk who looks as tired as she is. And the cruelest arithmetic of all is the one you cannot escape noticing. These few weeks are when the store harvests its fortune, the season that can make the entire year profitable, the period when the money pours in faster than the brass tubes can carry it. And of that great river of holiday gold, the share that reaches you is the same thin trickle as always, perhaps with a small token at the end of it if the owner is feeling festive, which he generally is not. You generate the magic and the money both, and you are permitted to keep a sip of the second and none of the first. So you spend the most wonderful time of the year on aching feet, smiling at strangers, wrapping the happiness of others, watching a fortune flow past you toward a name carved over a door. And when the season finally ends and the decorations come down, you will feel something that is not quite relief and not quite grief. The particular hollowness of having given everything to a celebration that was never really yours. Then you will notice you're starving, and you will remember the one cruel joke the store has saved for you about food. At some point you may wonder why a store that sells coats and curtains also keeps a grand dining room, a tea salon, and a soda fountain bubbling away near the perfume counter. The answer, as always, is delightfully cynical. A customer who must leave the building to eat is a customer who might not come back. So the store feeds them. It pours them tea, serves them chicken salad on delicate plates, and surrounds them with comfort. Also, they will stay inside the warm, clockless, windowless wonderland for hours longer than they ever intended. The restaurant rarely needs to turn a profit on its own. Its real job is to keep the spending going. You naturally will not be eating there. Your meal is bread, and your dining room is a stairwell. The logic is the same logic that runs the whole building, simply applied to lunch. The store has spent enormous effort keeping the customer inside, removing the clocks, hiding the daylight, scenting the air, gliding her gently up the moving staircase past every temptation. The single greatest threat to all that careful work is hunger, because a hungry shopper leaves, and a shopper who leaves to find a meal may very well decide over that meal that she has spent quite enough and ought to go home. Each departure is a leak in the dam. The dining room plugs it, so the store builds her a reason to stay. A proper tea room with white tablecloths and attentive waiters. A restaurant grand enough to be a destination in itself, the kind of place a lady might arrange to meet a friend. A soda fountain hissing out sweet cold drinks for the children and the weary. These rooms are designed to delight, and they do, and the delight is entirely strategic. A fed, rested, refreshed customer does not go home. She dabs her mouth, gathers her packages, and sails back out onto the floor for another few hours, her energy restored, her purse reopened, her afternoon now belonging wholly to the store. The dining room rarely needs to make money on its own, and often it does not. The food can be priced gently, even generously, because its real value is not in what it earns but in what it prevents, which is the customer's escape. Lose a little on the chicken salad, gain a great deal on everything she buys in the 3 extra hours the chicken salad bought you. It is a loss leader you can eat, and it is one of the cleverest tricks in a building absolutely stuffed with them. The modern shopping centre that surrounds you with a food court, the giant warehouse store that lures you in with cheap meals at the entrance, All of them are quoting this exact menu. For you, of course, the dining room is a foreign country. You will never sit at one of those white-clothed tables. You will never be served. The grand rooms full of food exist a few floors away from where you stand, close enough to smell on a slow afternoon, entirely closed to you in every way that matters. Your own meal is whatever you brought from the boarding house, eaten quickly and out of sight, in a stairwell or a stockroom, in the few stolen minutes the day allows, before you return to your feet. There is a particular flavour to that injustice, sharper than hunger. You spend your days inside one of the most abundant places on earth, surrounded by luxury and comfort, and now by actual delicious food being carried past on silver trays, and none of it is for you. You are the one who makes the abundance run, and you are fed the least of anyone in the building. The palace will pour tea for a stranger to keep her shopping and will not spare a chair or a proper meal for the woman selling its buttons. You eat your bread on the cold stairs, you brush the crumbs away, and you go back out to smile. And somewhere out beyond the city, a thick paper book is quietly teaching the whole countryside that they do not need to come to the palace at all. While you stand on your aching feet in the city, a quieter revolution is rolling out across the countryside in the form of a thick paper book, the mail-order catalogue. For families living miles from any town, this catalogue is a miracle. A store the size of a barn squeezed neatly between two covers, offering everything from corsets to cook stoves to, astonishingly, entire houses delivered by rail in numbered crates. They call it the Wish Book, and farm families read it like scripture. But for every rural customer it delights, a small-town shopkeeper somewhere is watching his livelihood quietly evaporate. The same machine that brings the world to the farmhouse door is steadily hollowing out the little shops on Main Street, one mailed order at a time. Progress, it turns out, usually arrives with a bill for someone. Picture the farmhouse this book lands in. A family living far from any city, dependent for goods on a single local store that stocks what it pleases, at the prices it pleases, and tolerates no argument, because where else are you going to go? Then the catalogue arrives in the post. Hundreds of pages of everything imaginable, illustrated, described and priced in plain printed numbers that cannot be haggled up when the merchant decides he does not like your face. To a rural family it is not a book, it is a doorway, and on the far side of it is the entire bustling world they have been cut off from, and the selection is genuinely staggering. Clothing, tools, furniture, toys, musical instruments, medicines, farm equipment, jewellery, and, in time, kits for entire houses, every beam and nail and shingle numbered and shipped by rail car to be assembled on your own land. A family could, quite literally, mail away for a home. The catalogue promised that no matter how remote your patch of earth, the abundance of the great stores was now yours too, carried to the nearest rail depot by the same expanding railroads that were stitching the whole country together. The farm families adored it with an intensity that is hard to overstate. The catalogue was read by lamplight, pored over, dreamed across. It taught rural children their letters and their numbers. Old volumes, once superseded, were put to a second use in the outhouse, which is its own quiet testament to how thoroughly the book was woven into daily life. It was nicknamed the Wish Book for a reason, because turning its pages was an act of wishing, of imagining a fuller life and finding for once that the life was actually orderable. But every doorway someone walks through is a doorway someone else loses business at. The local merchant, who had survived for generations as the only game for miles, suddenly found his customers comparing his prices to printed ones from a distant warehouse that bought in such enormous quantities it could sell for less than he paid. The same revolution that liberated the farm family squeezed the small-town shop, and many of those shops, the heart of many a main street, withered as the orders flowed past them to a depot and a faraway address. The countryside got its abundance, and it paid for it with the slow death of the corner store. You have seen this story before because you are living one chapter of it, and the world has lived several since. The mail order catalogue did to the small-town merchant precisely what the screen in your pocket would one day do to the very department store you're standing in. The same logic of scale and convenience and lower prices. The same delight for the customer and quiet ruin for whoever used to sell them things in person. The wish book was the first great act of selling from a distance, and the distance has only grown. Progress arrived, the farm family rejoiced, the shopkeeper closed his doors, and nobody could quite agree whether the world had gotten better or only larger. But the deepest reckoning these stores would face was not about distance at all. It was about who was allowed through the door in the first place. Let's step out of 1902 now and follow these stores forward through the century, because their history carries a shadow that must be spoken about honestly. For decades, in much of the country, the grand department store welcomed some customers and humiliated others. Black shoppers were often forbidden to try on clothing or hats, barred from fitting rooms, refused service at the very lunch counters that fed everyone else, and treated as unwelcome in spaces that loudly called themselves palaces for all. This was not an accident of the era. It was policy, enforced daily. And it is why, in 1960, young people sat down at segregated store counters and refused to leave, enduring abuse with extraordinary courage, turning a place built for selling into a place that helped change a nation. Their dignity is the part of this story most worth remembering. For all the talk of the department store as a democratic wonder, a place where anyone could walk in and feel like royalty, that promise was never extended to everyone. In much of the country, and especially across the South, a black customer's money was accepted while her humanity was not. She could buy a hat but was not permitted to try it on first, because the store would not let a black woman's head touch merchandise a white woman might later wear. She could purchase a dress but was denied the fitting room. She could spend her wages on the same goods as anyone else, and be refused the simple courtesies extended automatically to white shoppers around her. The lunch counter was the sharpest edge of it. These long counters, where tired shoppers perched to eat a sandwich and rest, were a small daily comfort of store life, and they were in many places strictly segregated. A black customer could shop in the store, hand over money at its counters, and then be refused a seat and a meal at the lunch counter a few feet away, told plainly that this comfort was not for her. The message was as deliberate as it was cruel. Your dollars are welcome here, but you are not. In 1960, that arrangement met a generation that refused to accept it. Young people, many of them students, began to sit down at segregated lunch counters and simply remain, quietly and peaceably, asking to be served like anyone else, and staying when they were not. They sat through refusal. They sat through insults, through food and drink poured over them, through threats and violence, and they did not retaliate, and they did not leave. Day after day they returned, more of them each time, their discipline and dignity in the face of abuse becoming a moral force that the country could not look away from. These sit-ins spread from city to city, counter to counter, and they worked. They drew the eyes of the nation to the everyday machinery of segregation, made its cruelty impossible to ignore, and applied a steady, courageous pressure that helped force change, not only at the counters themselves but in the larger movement for civil rights that was reshaping the country. A place built purely for commerce became, through the bravery of ordinary young people, a front line in the struggle for human dignity. It matters that this is part of the department store's story, not a footnote to it. The same building sold beauty and welcome, and the dream of belonging to some while denying the most basic respect to others. And the reckoning with that injustice was earned by people who put their bodies in harm's way at a counter and would not move. When we remember these palaces, we owe it to remember them whole, the wonder and the exclusion both, and above all to remember the courage that confronted it. The workers too would eventually decide that the way things were did not have to be the way things stayed. The workers too eventually stopped accepting that this was simply the way of things. The aching feet, the fines, the long days, the smiling silence all had a breaking point, and across the decades the people behind the counters began to organise. In one remarkable moment in the late 1930s, the women workers of a great five and dime did something nobody expected. They sat down right there on the sales floor in the middle of the store and refused to budge until they were heard. After a lifetime of being forbidden to sit at all, sitting itself became their weapon. They wanted shorter hours, fairer pay, and the simple recognition that they were human beings and not part of the furniture. It didn't fix everything, but it proved the one thing all that marble and gold had spent decades trying to hide. The palace could not run without them. For a long time, the imbalance of power seemed total. The store held every card, the wage, the job, the housing, the rules, and the endless queue of replacements outside the door. A single worker who complained was simply gone, and everyone knew it, and that knowledge kept the floor quiet. But what one worker could not do alone, many workers might do together, and slowly, over years, the people behind the counters began to understand that their weakness was only individual. Collectively, they were the entire workforce, and a store with no one to sell its goods is just a very expensive warehouse. The sit-down strike was a tactic of brilliant simplicity. Rather than walk out and leave the store free to bring in replacements, the workers stayed and stopped working and occupied the floor itself. They sat down among the merchandise they were paid to sell and refused to move, making it impossible for the store to operate and impossible to quietly fill their places with new hires because the old workers were still physically there holding the ground. The very building became the site of the protest. For women who had been forbidden from sitting for the length of their entire working lives, there was a deep and pointed justice in making the act of sitting down the thing that brought the palace to a halt. Their demands were not extravagant. They asked for shorter hours so a working day might leave room for a life. They asked for better pay, enough to live on without the grinding arithmetic of fines and board eating it all away. They asked for dignity, for the recognition that the person behind the counter was a human being with limits and needs, and not simply a fixture to be used until she wore out and was replaced. These were the modest requests of people who had given the store their feet, and their youth, and their smiles, and wanted in return to be treated as though they mattered. It took nerve that is easy to underestimate from a comfortable distance. To strike was to risk everything, the job, the wage, the roof, in a world that offered workers no safety net if the gamble failed. The women who sat down on those floors knew exactly what they stood to lose, and they sat anyway, because the alternative was to keep accepting the unacceptable forever. Their courage, like the courage at the lunch counters, was the courage of ordinary people deciding that some things are worth the risk. The strikes did not transform everything overnight, and the struggle for fair treatment of retail workers, like all such struggles, went on long after. But they changed what was thinkable. They proved that the smiling, silent, replaceable shop girl could speak and organise and stop the great machine cold. They forced the owners to negotiate with the people they had spent decades treating as furniture, and they left behind a truth that no amount of marble could ever bury again. The palace was never built by the man whose name was on the door. It was built and run and held up every single day by the people he paid the least. In time, even that hard-won leverage would not be enough to save the palaces themselves. And then, slowly, the palaces began to empty. The world that had made them grand kept changing, and they could not always change with it. Shoppers moved out to the suburbs, and the action followed them into the shopping mall, with its parking lots, its food courts, and its 100 smaller stores. The great downtown buildings, once the beating heart of the city, grew quiet. Then a newer machine arrived, one that did not even require leaving the house, and the catalogue's distant grandchild, the online store, began doing to the department store exactly what the department store had once done to the corner shop. One by one, the famous names dimmed, merged, and finally went dark. The cathedrals of spending were losing their congregation, and the marble started to feel a little cold. The first great shift was where people lived. The downtown department store had been built for a world that came into the city centre to shop, arriving by streetcar and on foot, drawn to the dense, bustling heart of things. But over the decades, the population drained outward into the suburbs, into a world of cars and driveways and distance, and the grand downtown palace, with no parking and a long trip into the city attached, began to feel less like a destination and more like a chore. The customers had not stopped shopping. They had simply moved, and the building could not follow. So a new kind of palace rose to meet them where they now lived. The shopping mall. It offered everything the downtown store could not. Acres of free parking, a roof over 100 shops at once, climate-controlled and weatherproof, a food court to keep the family fed, lifting the old dining room trick wholesale. The mall was the department store's logic turned inside out and dropped beside a highway, and for a long stretch of years it thrived, becoming the new centre of community life, a place a generation went to meet, to wander, to spend an afternoon. The old downtown giants, meanwhile, anchored these malls or withered without them, their original grand buildings increasingly hollow. And then came the machine that needed no building at all. The catalogue had once let a farmer order the world by mail. Now a screen let anyone order anything from a chair in their own home, with more selection than any store could shelve, at prices a business with no marble and no floor walkers and no grand staircase could undercut without trying. It was the wish book again, instantaneous and infinite, and it did to the department store precisely what the department store's own catalogue had done to Main Street a century before. The wheel had come all the way around, and the great stores now found themselves cast as the corner shop being hollowed out by something faster, cheaper, and elsewhere. The famous names began to fall. Stores that had stood for generations, whose buildings were landmarks and whose windows had drawn evening crowds, dimmed their lights for the last time. Some merged into one another in a long, sad consolidation. Great rival houses folded together under a single surviving name, until even that name struggled. Others simply closed, their enormous floors emptied, their fixtures sold, their grand spaces left echoing. The cathedrals that had taught a nation how to want now found themselves unwanted, monuments to a way of shopping the world had moved past. There is a melancholy in it that even the dry-eyed must feel. These buildings had been the proudest expression of an age, the place where the modern act of shopping was invented, where windows dreamed and escalators climbed and a fortune flowed through brass tubes in the ceiling. To see them go quiet, to see the great floors stand empty where the crowds once surged, is to watch an entire world end, slowly and without drama, the way most worlds actually do. The congregation drifted away. The doors were locked and the palaces were left to wait, as palaces do for someone to wander in and wonder what they once had been. Walk through one of these old buildings today if you can find one still standing, and you will feel something strange in the air, a grandeur with no one left to impress. Some have been turned into offices, apartments, or libraries. The grand staircase now leads to a parking structure, and the soda fountain is a row of cubicles. But if you stand very still beneath a high ceiling, you can almost hear it. The hiss of the brass tubes, the murmur of 1,000 shoppers, the soft, endless ache of the women who stood here from dawn to dusk and were never once allowed to sit. These places sold beauty, comfort, and dreams, and they were built on exhaustion, surveillance, and a great deal of quiet suffering. Both things are true at the very same time, and that is the dark history humming behind the most beloved palaces America ever built. The lucky building survived by becoming something else, a great store reborn as offices, its sweeping floors carved into cubicles and conference rooms. Another turned into apartments, families now sleeping where the perfume counter used to be. A few became libraries or museums or grand event halls, their bones too beautiful to demolish, their purpose entirely rewritten. Walk into one of these and you can still read the old grandeur and the high ceilings, the marble, the staircase built for a procession, all of it now serving lives that have nothing to do with selling gloves. The body of the palace remains, the soul has moved out, and if you know what to listen for, the building will tell you about that soul. Run your hand along a counter and think of the women who stood behind it for 12 hours without rest. Look up at the ceiling and imagine the brass tubes that once whistled money through it, because no one would trust the workers with a drawer. Picture the small children running the floor, the fire-trapped stairwells, the locked doors, the dining room that fed strangers to keep them spending while the staff ate bread on the stairs. The beauty is still visible everywhere. The cost of the beauty is harder to see, but it is there, soaked into the same walls. This is the thing to carry away, and it resists the easy ending. It would be simple to say the department stores were wonderful, and they were. It would be just as simple to say they were cruel, and they were that too. The honest truth is that both are true at once and always were. The same institution that brought genuine beauty and wonder and delight to millions of ordinary lives also ran on the exhaustion of underpaid women, the labour of children, the surveillance of everyone, and for far too long, the exclusion of those it deemed unwelcome at its counters. The magic was real. So was the suffering underneath it. Neither cancels the other. That is usually how it goes with the grand things people build. The cathedral and the cruelty share a foundation. The dream in the window was assembled by tired hands that would never live the dream. The wonder was genuine, and so was the bill, and the people who paid the bill were rarely the people who enjoyed the wonder. To remember these palaces honestly is to hold the whole of it, the glittering and the grim, and to refuse the comfort of pretending it was only ever one. So the next time you pass a grand old building with good bones and a vanished purpose, or glide up a moving staircase in some bright store that still survives, or simply order something from a screen and watch it appear at your door, spare a thought for the marble palaces and the people inside them, the merchant kings who dreamed them, yes, but more than that, the shop girls who stood, the children who ran, the strikers who finally sat, and the brave young people who sat down at counters that didn't want them and changed the country by refusing to rise. They are the ghosts in the grand halls. The buildings were beautiful. The people were the real history. And that, listener, is what hums behind the most beloved palaces America ever built. Before the moving staircase frightened anyone, there was the elevator, and where there was an elevator, there was a girl trapped inside it all day long smiling. Let's talk about her, because tomorrow she might be you. The lift is a marvel of brass and polished wood, a little jewelled room that rises and falls through the heart of the store, and it does not run itself. It is worked by hand, by a young woman in a crisp uniform who stands in the corner of that gilded cage from morning until the gas lamps glow, opening the gate, closing the gate, calling out the floors and easing a brass lever to stop the car level with the landing, over and over and over, until she could do it in her sleep, which, frankly, she sometimes nearly does. It looks like the easiest job in the building, and that is exactly the trap of it. She does not have to stand on a hard floor. She has to stand on a slightly different hard floor that also moves. She does not have to face a crowd. She has to face a fresh crowd every 30 seconds, packed shoulder to shoulder into a box the size of a generous wardrobe, all of them breathing the same air, all of them somehow her responsibility. She announces each floor in a clear, pleasant, endlessly repeated chant, the names of the departments rolling off her tongue 10,000 times a day until the words stop meaning anything at all. Ground floor, notions and gloves. Second floor, ladies' garments. Third floor, furnishings. Mind the gate, please. The skill that nobody credits is the landing. Stopping a hand-worked lift exactly level with the floor is a real art, eased out on a lever by feel alone, and a girl who is good at it can bring the car to rest so smoothly that a customer steps out without a thought. A girl who is even slightly off leaves a small lip between the car and the landing, just enough to catch a heel or a hem, just enough for a customer to stumble and decide loudly that she has nearly been killed. The operator gets the blame, the customer gets the sympathy, and the little leather book gets another note. The serene smile you will recognize is required here too, and the cage is, in its quiet way, the most relentless post in the store. The shop girl at a counter at least sees a lull now and then, an empty afternoon, a moment to breathe. The elevator never has a lull, because the store never stops needing to move people up and down through all those tempting floors. up with the fresh and hopeful, down with the laden and spent, all day in a sealed brass box with no window, no clock, and no escape, but the very gate she keeps opening for everyone else. She is the most mobile worker in the building and the most thoroughly stuck. The modern rider jabbing a button in a silent steel box has no idea a person once stood in that corner for a living, chanting floors and feeling for the landing and smiling at strangers in a cage. The job lasted as long as the machines needed hands, and then the buttons arrived and the operators quietly vanished, replaced, like the cash boys before them, by a mechanism that did not need feeding, resting, or paying. For now, though, she rises and falls and rises again, the brightest, most cheerful prisoner in the whole grand store. Wave to her on your way up. She cannot wave back, she is holding the gate. Watch closely the next time a truly wealthy woman makes a purchase, because she will do something that ought to be impossible. She will buy a great armful of expensive things and pay with absolutely no money at all. No coins, no notes, nothing fired through the brass tubes. She will simply give a name, the clerk will write it in a ledger, and she will sail out the door with her treasures while the bill floats off to be settled later, somewhere, by someone, at some comfortably distant point in the future. It is called a charge account, and it is one of the most quietly powerful inventions in the entire building, because it has performed a small miracle on the human mind. It has separated the joy of getting from the pain of paying. For the grandest customers, this is a matter of pure convenience and prestige. A lady of standing does not handle vulgar cash. She has an account, and her household settles it monthly, and the arrangement marks her as exactly the sort of person the store most wishes to please. The charge account is a velvet rope. To be offered one is to be told you belong among the trusted and the wealthy, and people will spend a great deal simply to keep feeling that they belong there. But here is the trick the store has understood long before anyone gives it a name. A person spending real coins feels every one of them leave her hand. There is a small, healthy pain in watching your money go, and that pain is the natural brake on wanting. The charge account removes the brake entirely. When the payment is just a name in a ledger and a bill that arrives weeks later, the buying feels free, weightless, almost imaginary, and a customer who feels no pain in the moment will buy far more than a customer counting coins ever would. The store is not being generous by letting her pay later. The store has discovered that letting her pay later is how it gets her to pay more, and in time this magic trickles down from the wealthy to everyone else, in the form of buying on time, the installment plan, a little now and a little each week until the thing is finally yours, or finally paid for, which are not always the same date. Suddenly a family that could never have saved up for a fine piece of furniture can have it today, and owe for it tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. The doors of abundance swing open for people who could not otherwise afford to walk through them, which sounds like a kindness and is partly and is also a leash made of debt, tightening quietly with every easy purchase. You, behind your counter, see both ends of it. You see the wealthy woman who will never feel the cost of anything, and you see the strained family stretching a small wage across payments they will be making long after the thrill has faded. And you, of course, earning your fined and dwindling coins, are extended no such magic at all. You pay in hard money for everything, because the store reserves the dream of buying without paying for the customers it can profit from, not the workers it merely uses. The modern shopper knows this spell intimately, because it never broke. It only got a rectangle of plastic and a glowing screen. The charge account simply learned to fit in a pocket. The joy still comes first, weightless and free, and the pain still arrives later in an envelope with interest. The store taught the world to want without flinching, and the bill, as always, comes due for someone other than the man whose name is on the door. So how was your day in the palace? You woke before dawn in a borrowed bed, dressed like a duchess on the wage of a scullery maid, and stood on your aching feet from the first bell to the last, never once allowed to sit. You smiled through insults, dodged the floor walker, made change beneath the eyes of detectives who were sure you were a thief, and watched a fortune you helped create whistle up through the ceiling toward a name carved in gold above a door that was never yours. You dressed a dream in the window you would never get to live, and you ate your bread on a cold stairwell while strangers were served to tea a few floors above. And still, somehow, you made it to the end of the day.